In the summer of 1462, Mehmed II, the man who shattered the walls of Constantinople with the largest cannons the medieval world had ever built, rode toward a small Wallachian capital and stopped. Not because of an army. There was no army. The city of Târgovinte was abandoned, silent, and waiting. What Mehmed found instead, staked in the fields outside the city walls, were the impaled bodies of 20,000 Ottoman soldiers and prisoners arranged across an area so vast that his own chronicler, Tursun Beg, recorded that the Sultan's senior commanders physically refused to advance further. The greatest conqueror of the 15th century was halted not by steel or stone, but by a single man's willingness to do something so catastrophic to the human mind that an entire imperial army lost its nerve. Mehmed eventually turned back. He left Wallachia without taking it. And Vlad III, outnumbered, outgunned, and operating inside a country he was already losing, was captured within months, not by the Ottomans, but by his own Hungarian allies. So, how does a man win every battle and still lose everything? But before our journey begins, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's a simple and wonderful way to support the channel, and it means a great deal to me. I'm also always curious to know where in the world and at what time you're joining me tonight. It is the morning of late June 1462, and Mehmed II rides toward Târgovinte. Consider what that sentence contains. Consider the man it names. He is 30 years old, and he has already done the thing that every sultan before him attempted and failed. He has taken Constantinople. In the spring of 1453, 9 years before this morning, he assembled his cannon along the walls of the city that had stood as the eastern sentinel of Christian civilization for more than 1,000 years. And he broke those walls, and he rode through the breach on a white horse, and he dismounted inns, Ide the Hagia Sophia, and stood in the silence of a conquered cathedral while his soldiers divided the greatest city in the world around him. He is not a man who doubts himself. He has earned, through blood and calculation, a certainty about the direction of history that very few human beings ever achieve. He speaks 6 languages. He reads Greek philosophy. He collects maps. He understands, with the precision of a scholar and the appetite of a conqueror, exactly where he is in the story of the world, and he understands that the story is going his way. He has crossed the Danube at the head of an army variously estimated between 60,000 and 150,000 men. The chroniclers disagree on the number, as chroniclers do, but the disagreement does not matter much. Even the lower figure represents the largest military force assembled in Europe since antiquity. Cavalry and infantry, artillery and supply trains, the full machinery of the most sophisticated military apparatus of the 15th century, moving north through the Wallachian plain in the high summer heat. He has come, in the language of administration, to settle a problem. A vessel has become unreliable. A tributary state has stopped paying tribute. A man named Vlad, son of Vlad III, voivode of a small principality that exists in Ottoman accounting primarily as a source of revenue and a buffer against Hungarian pressure, has refused to pay, has killed Ottoman envoys, has crossed the Danube in the winter just past and killed tens of thousands of Ottoman subjects in Bulgaria with a thoroughness that was almost methodical, and has sent a letter north to his Hungarian patron cataloguing the dead. It is an act of aggression so brazen it borders on theater. It is, Mehmed understands, a provocation designed specifically to compel this response. He has responded. He is here. He expects the matter to be resolved in weeks. He has not expected this. The army slows before the fields outside Târgovinte, the way water slows before a dam, the forward ranks halting and the rear ranks pressing into them, until the entire column stands still in the summer heat and no one speaks. The city ahead is abandoned. The gates hang open. The streets beyond them are empty. There is no army drawn up for battle, no delegation riding out to negotiate, None of the conventional grammar of military confrontation that a commander of Mehmed's experience knows how to read and answer. What there is instead occupies the fields to the south and east of the walls, and the mind, encountering it, does not immediately comprehend what it sees. Begin with what is nearest. The stakes closest to the road are perhaps 3 meters high, each one sharpened to a point and driven deep into the earth, and on each one a human body, impaled through the torso with a precision that speaks of practice, of methodology, of someone who has done this enough times to develop a technique. The bodies are in varying stages of decomposition, some recent, some weeks old, the flesh in different registers of what heat and exposure do to flesh. The smell arrives before the full comprehension does. It is total and it is unmistakable, and it is the smell of thousands, not dozens. Then let the eye move outward. Beyond the nearest rank of stakes, another rank. Beyond that, another. The field does not end where a field should end. The eye travels and the stakes continue, the figures on them growing indistinct with distance, but not disappearing, row after row extending east and west in an arrangement that is not random, not the hasty work of a retreating army disposing of prisoners. The heights vary deliberately. Taller stakes at the perimeter, shorter ones within, gradations that give the installation a dimensionality, a topography, as if someone stood at a distance and considered the visual effect and made adjustments. The geometric intention of it is what the mind finally seizes on, because geometry implies planning, and planning implies time, and time implies a man who was calm enough in the weeks before the largest army in Europe crossed his border to stand in a field and think about composition. The numbers are somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000. State that plainly and let it stand. 20,000 to 30,000 human beings, most of them Ottoman soldiers and subjects captured in the winter raids and in the weeks since, arranged in a field outside an abandoned city by a man who understood that he could not defeat the army coming to kill him and chose instead to speak to it. As commander, in the only language he calculated would be heard. It is not a battlefield, it is a letter. It is the most expensive letter in the history of southeastern Europe. And Mehmed II, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Conqueror of Constantinople, a man who has looked at death in every form that the 15th century offers, reads it and, by the accounts we have, cannot speak. There is a court historian present. His name is Tursun Beg, and this fact matters more than it might initially appear. A court historian is a professional whose function is the glorification of power, the recording of victories, the amplification of the Sultan's greatness, the conversion of military campaigns into literature that serves the dynasty. Tursun Beg is good at his job. He is loyal and he is skilled, and his account of the Ottoman campaigns of this era is meticulous in its admiration of Mehmed's genius. And yet, when Tursun Beg writes about this morning outside Tagovinte, something in his prose goes unsteady. The official architecture of court history develops, in these passages, small cracks. He records Ottoman fear. He records the army's hesitation. He records, with a candor that no official mandate could have required and that professional instinct should have suppressed, that what the Sultan's soldiers saw in those fields outside the abandoned city caused in them something that the word fear does not quite adequately name. The word in the sources is closer to paralysis, closer to the specific dread of encountering a mind that operates outside the expected parameters of human behavior. That Tursun Beg writes this at all is the most interesting thing about him. He was there, and what he saw moved him to a candor unusual in the literature of conquest, and that candor tells us something the numbers alone cannot. What Mehmed does next belongs to the chapters that follow. The context for that decision requires more than a single morning. It requires the full weight of what this campaign has already been, the weeks of marching through a landscape systematically unmade by a retreating enemy, the poisoned wells and the burned villages and the driven-off livestock, the night 2 weeks before when cavalry came out of the darkness to ward. his personal encampment with an objective that was not to win a battle, but to kill him specifically. All of that belongs to its proper moment. What this morning outside Taugovite demands, first, is a question, not the question of how, the logistics of mass impalement, the organization required, the number of men and stakes and hours. These are answerable in their grim arithmetic, and the answer is simply that a ruler with absolute authority over a terrified population can accomplish things that a ruler accountable to anyone cannot. The how is not the mystery. The question is what it costs. What it costs a human being to become the kind of mind that stands in a field and thinks geometrically about the arrangement of the dead. What it costs to look at 20,000 bodies and see not an atrocity, but a tool, a psychological instrument calibrated to the specific fears and the specific pride of a specific man riding toward you at the head of the world's most powerful army. What experience, what sequence of losses and betrayals and lessons learned under duress produces a person capable of this particular calculation? The question that will haunt the rest of this story, and that haunts every serious examination of power and its limits, is not how Vlad built the forest of the dead, but why it worked. What does it mean that the man who took Constantinople could not take Wallachia? And what does it cost a human being to become the kind of mind capable of constructing such a weapon? The answer does not begin here. It does not begin in the winter raids across the Danube, or in the years of brutal consolidation through which Vlad made himself the sole and terrifying center of Wallachian power, or even in the moment his father was murdered and the news traveled across enemy lines to a boy already in captivity. The answer begins earlier than any of that, in a transaction so routine by the standards of the age that no one present likely understood what it would eventually produce. It begins in 1442, in the Ottoman court at Edirne, a city that has not yet been eclipsed by Constantinople, in an empire that has not yet achieved the thing that will define it, where a man named Vlad III, Voivode of Wallachia, delivers his two younger sons to the Sultan as surety for his loyalty. Here, the older of the two boys is perhaps 11 years old. His name is Vlad. He is not yet the third of that name, not yet the voivode, not yet anything except a child being handed to his father's sovereign as a guarantee of behavior his father may or may not intend to exhibit. He does not know, as he enters Edirne, that he will not see his father alive again. He does not know that the years ahead of him will constitute the most consequential education in the history of southeastern Europe. He does not know that he is already in the custody of the most powerful empire in the world, learning the first and most fundamental lesson of his life. That knowledge, in the absence of every other resource, is the only weapon that cannot be taken from you. We begin not here but 20 years earlier, in a city that is not yet conquered, in the hands of a father who does not yet know he is delivering his son to the education that will make him the most feared man in Europe. The road south from Wallachia in the year 1442 is not a road toward defeat. Vlad III, Voivode of Wallachia, understands this with the clarity of a man who has spent his entire political life reading terrain. It is a road towards survival, which in the arithmetic of small principalities is the only victory available. He rides with his sons, the older boy Vlad, perhaps 11, and the younger, Radu, perhaps 7, and the procession has the quality of a diplomatic mission, because that is precisely what it is. There are no chains. There are no soldiers with drawn weapons flanking the family on the road. The Ottoman Sultan Murad II has requested hostages as surety for Wallachian loyalty, and Vlad Dracul has agreed, and the agreement is being honored. The transaction is routine. The transaction is monstrous. It is both of these things simultaneously, and the 15th century sees no contradiction in this. Wallachia, in 1442, is a country that does not have the luxury of sovereignty in any meaningful sense. It sits between powers, the way a river sits between banks, shaped entirely by what presses against it from either side. To the north and west, Hungary asserts its Catholic dominion over the Carpathian frontier with the confident aggression of a kingdom that considers Wallachia a tributary concern. To the south and east, the Ottoman Empire presses outward with the steady, inexorable pressure of a civilization that has already decided where history is going. Wallachia pays tribute. It sends men, it sends grain, and now, in 1442, it sends sons, because the throne is worth the price, and the price is always paid in something irreplaceable. Vlad III is not a weak man, he is a precise one. He has navigated the impossible geometry of his position for years, tilting toward Hungary when the Ottomans press too hard, tilting toward the Ottomans when Hungary threatens too openly, maintaining the throne through a series of calibrated surrenders that preserve the essential thing, the Principa. Liti itself, the continuity of rule, the fact of Wallachia's continued existence as a distinct political entity rather than an absorbed province. When he delivers his sons to Murad II at Edirne, he is doing the only thing available to him, and he knows it. And the knowing does not make it easier or harder, it makes it necessary. This is the cold grammar of political survival, and Vlad III has been reading it his entire life. The boy watches his father right away. What the boy sees when he arrives at Edirne is not a dungeon. This is the detail that history most often obscures, because the later story of Vlad III is so saturated with darkness that we are tempted to project that darkness backward, to imagine the child suffering in chains, to make the captivity a simple cruelty. But Edirne is not simple, and the Ottoman imperial court is not simple, and the education that begins here is not simple. Edirne is the most sophisticated imperial capital in the world, a city of mosques and markets and administrative buildings, of scholars and soldiers and bureaucrats, of a court that has developed over generations the complex machinery of an empire that spans 3 continents. The boys are housed, they are fed, they are educated, they move within the court with a freedom that is precisely calibrated, wide enough to prevent despair, narrow enough to prevent escape. They are guests who cannot leave. This is a cruelty so refined, it barely looks like cruelty at all. The older boy absorbs everything. This is not a metaphor. It is a behavioral fact that will define the next 2 decades of his life and reshape the history of Southeastern Europe. He learns Turkish, not the halting, functional Turkish of a man who needs to negotiate, but the fluent, idiomatic Turkish of someone who has listened long enough to hear the thinking behind the words. He watches the Janissaries at their drills in the courtyards of Edirne, and what he sees is not merely soldiers, but a system. The Ottoman Empire's most brilliant administrative innovation. The conversion of conquered children into the empire's most loyal soldiers, men who owe everything they are to the Sultan, and therefore have nowhere else to direct their devotion. He watches the bureaucratic machinery of imperial administration, the flow of tribute and information and military resources across distances that would have paralyzed any European kingdom, and he understands how it works. He understands the logic of it. He is a student in a school that does not know it is teaching him, and he is the most attentive student the school has ever had. But there is another education running alongside this visible one, deeper and quieter and more consequential. It has no classroom and no instructor. It is the education of being held as collateral. To be a hostage is to understand from the inside the precise mechanism of power. The boy Vlad knows, in a way that most children never have occasion to know, that his freedom is not his own, that it is instead the numerical expression of his father's loyalty, a quantity that can be adjusted upward or downward depending on political conditions that have nothing to do with him personally. He is not a person in this arrangement. He is a variable. He is the thing that makes the equation balance. And he watches the Ottomans, the men who hold him, the administrators who process him, the court that displays him, and he understands that they do not see him as a person either. They see him as a mechanism of leverage, a guarantee, a tool. He is 11 years old, and he is learning what it means to be used, and he is learning it with the concentrated attention of a child who has already understood that attention is survival. What this does to a child's understanding of power cannot be reduced to trauma alone, though trauma is certainly present. What it produces is something more precise than damage. It produces clarity. The boy sees the Ottoman Empire not as its subjects see it, from below, with the fear and awe appropriate to overwhelming force, and not as its enemies see it, from outside, with the defensive hostility of those who have not yet been absorbed. He sees it from inside the machinery, from the position of a man who is himself a working part of the mechanism. He understands the empire's logic because he is subject to it, and the understanding is not academic. It is visceral. It is daily. It is the texture of every waking hour in Edirne. In 1447, the information arrives. It comes across enemy lines, as all information does in this world, fragmented, delayed, already shaped by the interests of whoever is carrying it. The information is this: Vlad III, Voivode of Wallachia, is dead, murdered, almost certainly at the instigation of John Hunyadi, the Hungarian regent, who has found Vlad II's Ottoman accommodation politically intolerable. The boy, who is no longer quite a boy, receives this news in the Ottoman court at Edirne, and there is no clean grief available to him. There cannot be, because the man who almost certainly arranged his father's death is also, by the cold geometry of his situation, the only plausible instrument of his eventual return to the Wallachian throne. Hunyadi holds Hungary. Hungary is the Western counterweight to Ottoman pressure. Without Hungarian backing, there is no path back to Wallachia. And so the boy must hold these two facts in his mind simultaneously: that Hunyadi has murdered his father, and that Hunyadi is necessary. And he must not let the first fact destroy the utility of the second. He does not. This tells us something essential about what Edirne has made him. There is, in the Ottoman court during these years, another boy, Radu, younger by perhaps 4 years, softer in his features, different in his dispositions, in ways that the sources hint at without fully articulating. Radu moves through the same captivity, breathes the same air, witnesses the same administrative grandeur, endures the same precise cruelty of being a guest who cannot leave. And Radu responds to all of it in precisely the opposite way. Where his brother watches the Ottomans with the cool, analytical attention of a man studying an enemy, Radu moves toward them. He learns their language not as intelligence, but as belonging. He absorbs their culture not as a weapon, but as an identity. He becomes, over the years of captivity at Edirne, something genuinely Ottoman in his orientation, culturally, personally, perhaps in ways that the chroniclers of the period circle around without naming directly. He grows close to the young Prince Mehmed, who will one day take Constantinople, and the closeness is real, and it will have consequences that reach forward across 2 decades to the summer of 1462, when Radu becomes the instrument through which his brother is finally undone. The same captivity, the same court, the same years. 2 completely different responses. History does not offer a clean explanation for this, and we should be suspicious of anyone who does. The variables are too many and too fine. Temperament, age, the specific relationships each boy forms in Edirne, the 1,000 daily encounters that shape a person below the level of conscious decision. What we can say is that the divergence is real, and that it is already visible during the years of captivity, and that it plants a shadow in the story that will not resolve for a very long time. The boy who watches everything watches his brother too. He watches Radu move toward the Ottomans with the same concentrated attention he brings to everything else in Edirne. And what he understands, or what he will understand in the fullness of the years that follow, is that the Ottoman Empire is not merely a military and administrative force. It is also a gravitational one. It pulls. It offers belonging to those who will accept belonging on its terms, and the terms are not without their attractions. Stability, sophistication, the sense of being part of something vast and permanent and destined. The empire knows how to make itself feel like home to the people it absorbs, and this knowledge is perhaps its most powerful weapon, more durable than any janissary corps, more effective than any tribute system. The older boy does not move toward it. He cannot explain this, perhaps even to himself. It is not a reasoned decision so much as a constitutional one, a fact about the structure of his attention, the direction of his will. He watches the empire's gravity at work on his brother and on the court around him, and he remains outside it, separate, observing. Not because he is stronger than Radu, or better than Radu, or more virtuous, but because something in him has already decided that understanding a thing and becoming a part of that thing are not the same, and that the difference between them is everything. He is, by the time the years at Edirne finally conclude, no longer a child. He is something more precise than that. He has been given, by accident of political circumstance and by his own relentless application, the most complete education in Ottoman power that any non-Ottoman of his generation will ever receive. He speaks the language. He knows the military system. He understands the administrative logic. He has watched the empire's methods of control, hostage-taking, tribute extraction, the cultivation of loyal local clients from the inside, and he has understood them not as facts to be memorized, but as mechanisms to be analyzed, reversed, and ultimately turned. History tends to explain Vlad's later ferocity as pathology, as the product of a damaged mind, a traumatized child grown into a sadistic ruler. This is too simple and too comfortable. What the Ottoman captivity produces is not a broken man, but a complete one. A man who understands power from the inside of its machinery, who has been used as a tool and therefore understands exactly how tools are made and what they are for. The impalement forests and the night attack and the poisoned wells are not the acts of a madman. They are the acts of a student who has learned his lessons perfectly and chosen his own curriculum. Edirne does not wound him into cruelty. It educates him into precision. The wound and the education are not the same thing, though they share the same years and the same walls and the same cold geometry of a child held as the numerical expression of his father's loyalty. He leaves Edirne carrying everything. He leaves it knowing that the empire he has just spent years studying will one day have to be answered. And he leaves his brother behind, already becoming someone else, already moving toward the gravity that his older brother has spent every day in Edirne refusing. The shadow of that divergence stretches forward into the future, patient and quiet, waiting for its moment. The door that Wallachia presents to Vlad III in 1448 is not ornate. It is not the kind of door that a man might admire or feel proud to have opened. It is low and cold, and it opens only because someone more powerful than Vlad has decided, for reasons entirely their own, to turn the handle from the other side. He is 17, perhaps 18. The Ottoman court has released him, or more precisely, deployed him, as a counterpiece on a board where John Hunyadi has momentarily left his flank exposed. Hunyadi is fighting elsewhere. The Ottomans see an opening, and Vlad is the instrument they choose to fill it. He takes the Wallachian throne in the autumn of 1448, with Ottoman soldiers at his back, and the understanding, which he cannot afford to examine too closely, that this is not a coronation. It is a placement, a piece moved by a hand that retains the right to move it again. He holds the throne for 2 months. When Hunyadi's attention swings back toward Wallachia, the Ottoman support evaporates with the speed that must feel to a young man already schooled in betrayal, almost elegant in its completeness. Vlad does not fight. He understands the arithmetic. He goes into exile, north, into Moldavia, toward the court of his cousin Stephen, who will one day be called the Great, though he is not yet great, only young and watchful, and similarly hemmed in by forces that dwarf him. What Vlad carries out of his first reign is not bitterness, or not only bitterness. He carries a lesson so precise it has the quality of a surgical finding. A throne held by one patron's sufferance is not a throne, it is a loan, and loans have recall dates that the borrower does not set. Stephen's court in Moldavia offers him something he has not had in years, a version of warmth, a language that is nearly his own, a cousin who understands from the inside what it means to rule a small country in the long shadow of competing empires. They are young men together in a way that neither of them will be able to afford for much longer. And there is a quality to those months in Moldavia that the historical record, sparse as it is, cannot quite extinguish. A provisional ease, a place to breathe. And yet, Vlad is never fully at rest. The men around Stephen are watching him with a respect that contains, just beneath its surface, a careful distance, the distance that courts always maintain from those who have lost their thrones, because proximity to a fallen claimant is a liability until it suddenly becomes an asset, and no one know in advance which it will be. He watches, he calculates, he waits. The Transylvanian period that follows is where the chapter of his education becomes genuinely difficult to read, not because the facts are obscure, but because the psychological demand it makes on Vlad III is so extraordinary that it requires the reader to stop and sit with it rather than move past it. Transylvania is Hungarian territory. Matthias Corvinus, son of John Hunyadi, is consolidating his father's power and his father's legacy. And John Hunyadi, it must be said plainly, almost certainly arranged the murder of Vlad's father. The complicity is not documented with courtroom precision, but it is understood by everyone who moves through these courts, including Vlad, including Matthias. It is the kind of knowledge that exists in the room without being spoken aloud. The way that certain structural facts about a building are understood by everyone inside it without anyone having to point at the walls. And Vlad makes peace with Matthias Corvinus, not a grudging accommodation, not a temporary truce maintained through gritted teeth and visible strain. He makes a working alliance, a functional political relationship in which he subordinates everything he feels, the grief, the rage, the memory of his father's body, the memory of receiving that news across enemy lines as a captive child, and converts it into strategic utility. He will be useful to Matthias. Matthias will be useful to him. The transaction is clean. It is also one of the coldest acts of self-mastery in the entire history of the story, and it is important not to let it pass without weight. What this requires is not the suppression of feeling. Suppression breaks eventually. And when it breaks badly. What Vlad demonstrates in Transylvania is something more difficult and more dangerous, the capacity to hold grief and rage and strategic calculation simultaneously in the same mind, fully present, none of them contaminating the others. To know what Matthias's father did, and to sit across a table from Matthias, and to negotiate, and to mean it. This is the psychological key to everything that follows. Every act of Vlad's second reign, every decision that will strike observers as either brilliant or monstrous, flows from this capacity, this ability to see clearly without being distorted by what he sees, to feel without being governed by what he feels. He is not cold. He is disciplined in a way that looks like cold to anyone who cannot distinguish between the two. He reclaims the throne definitively in 1456. Hunyadi himself dies that same year, of plague, somewhere in the campaigns against the Ottomans, and there is a certain grim irony in the timing, the old enemy departing the stage just as Vlad steps fully onto it. He is 25 or thereabouts. He has been a captive, an exile, a pretender, a guest, a calculation. Now he is a voivode, in fact, and the first thing he does with the fact of power is reach for the problem that has unmade every ruler before him, the boyars. The boyar class of Wallachia is not simply a nobility, it is a structural condition. These are the great landowners, the regional power brokers, the men whose shifting loyalties have destabilized every voivode living memory can name, including Vlad's own father, who died in part because the boyars around him were already repositioning toward whatever wind they detected coming next. They are not villains in any simple sense. They are rational actors in a system that rewards flexibility and punishes commitment, and they have been practicing this flexibility for generations. They are very good at it. Vlad decides to solve this problem. The impalements that follow, and they are documented. They are not legend. The sources, both Romanian and Ottoman and German, confirm them with a consistency that rules out fabrication, are not the product of madness or cruelty as an end in itself. They are a technology. This is the hardest thing to say about Vlad III, and also the most necessary. What he is doing works. Not morally, not humanly, but structurally, as a solution to a specific political problem. It works with a terrible efficiency. He is not raging, he is not performing. He is communicating a single message with the most legible medium available to a 15th century ruler who has no standing army large enough to maintain order through conventional force. The calculation that boyars have always made, the calculation that says disloyalty is survivable, that switch-in. G-sides carries acceptable risk, that the next regime will pardon what the current one punishes. That calculation is now incorrect. The cost of disloyalty has been revised upward past any threshold that rational actors will cross. The feasts conducted near the stakes are the part that the German pamphlets will emphasize, the detail that will travel west and grow in the telling until it becomes the furniture of nightmare. But even here, the logic is not absent. He is demonstrating that he is not afraid of what he has done. He is demonstrating that he can look at it without flinching. He is making the statement that a ruler who is capable of this and unbothered by it is a ruler of a different category than any they have dealt with before. He is right. And he is building something that will not hold. This is the structural paradox that lives inside every decision of Vlad's second reign. Terror is a load-bearing material. It performs under compression. When the pressure comes from outside, when the threat is Ottoman or Hungarian or boyar conspiracy, the structure holds. It is rigid and it is strong, and nothing moves that he does not want to move. But terror cannot flex. It cannot redistribute load when the pressure changes direction. And a population living inside a structure made entirely of terror is a population that is, at every moment, calculating the cost of remaining inside it versus the cost of finding another shelter. They are not loyal, they are compliant. These are not the same thing. And the difference will matter enormously when the moment arrives that requires something loyalty can provide and compliance cannot. Into this structure, into this carefully constructed architecture of fear, a figure now enters who has been waiting in the margins of the story since childhood. Radu, the younger brother, the boy who was delivered alongside Vlad to the Ottoman court at Edirne in 1442, and who made, in that court, a different set of choices. He is an adult now. He is cultured in the Ottoman manner, fluent in Turkish, personally close, by all accounts genuinely close, to Mehmed II himself. He has absorbed the empire, not as a captive studying an enemy, but as a young man who found, in that world, something that fit him. He has become, over the years in Edirne, someone his brother would not entirely recognize. The Ottomans are not blind to what they have in Radu. They see him clearly, a Wallachian claimant of legitimate blood, presentable, amenable, already integrated into the Ottoman system in ways that make him infinitely more manageable than his brother. He is the ready answer to the question that Vlad is posing, with increasing volume from his throne in Targovite. Every time Vlad refuses the tribute, every time he arrests an Ottoman envoy, every time he makes a decision that signals his intention to treat Wallachia as a sovereign entity rather than a revenue-generating dependency, the Ottomans look at Radu and see the solution. Not yet, but soon. Vlad does not ignore this. He cannot. He knows his brother exists, knows what his brother represents, knows that the empire he spent years learning in Edirne has been spending those same years learning his brother. He has built a throne that rests on the fear of his own people and the backing of a Hungarian patron who values him as an instrument of frontier policy rather than as an ally in any meaningful sense. Matthias Corvinus supports Vlad the way a craftsman supports a useful tool, with attention and maintenance, but without sentiment, and with the clear-eyed understanding that tools are replaced when they become liabilities. There is a kind of genius in what Vlad has built. Stand back far enough and it has the quality of a military fortification, brutal in its angles, uncompromising in its purpose, effective against the specific threats it was designed to repel. He has stabilized the throne. He has terrorized the boyars into a temporary submission that no voivode before him has managed to maintain. He has signaled to the Ottomans that Wallachia under his rule will not be a comfortable tributary, but a problem requiring active management. He has done all of this with limited resources, limited allies, and a country that has never in its history been asked to be anything more than a buffer. But there is a paradox built into the foundation of everything Vlad is constructing. A ruler who governs through terror has solved the loyalty problem only temporarily, because terror requires constant renewal, and a population living in constant terror is a population looking for any exit from terror, including the exit of a foreign conqueror who promises to be less frightening. Vlad is building his throne on a material that is strong under compression and catastrophically brittle under tension. He does not see this yet. He is too busy solving the immediate problem to see the structural one. The immediate problem in the late 1450s is this: the annual tribute still flows south. It flows south in silver and in boys, in livestock and in deference, and every year that it flows south, it confirms what the Ottoman Empire wishes every client state to understand: that the arrangement is permanent, that the hierarchy is settled, that Wallachia exists at the empire's discretion and not by any right of its own. Vlad has watched this flow his entire adult life. He has watched it as a prisoner in Edirne, where the tribute from a dozen subjugated principalities arrived with the regularity of the seasons. He has watched it as a pretender in exile, as a client voivode, as a man who has held power and lost it and clawed it back again. He has watched it and he has understood it with the precision of someone who was educated in its machinery from childhood. And sometime in the late 1450s, he stops paying. It is not an explosion. It is not a public ceremony of defiance. It is simply the absence of what was previously present. And in the language of imperial administration, an absence of that kind speaks with absolute clarity. The envoys come north to collect what is owed. They come with the confidence of men performing a routine function, men whose authority rests not on their own persons, but on the vast weight of the civilization behind them. They do not return to Constantinople. What Vlad does to them has been recorded in several sources, and the details, whether precisely accurate or slightly embellished in the retelling, carry the unmistakable signature of a man who is communicating rather than simply killing. The envoys, it is said, refuse to remove their turbans in his presence, a gesture of contempt or of protocol, depending on whose court you are standing in. Vlad has their turbans nailed to their heads, and then he has them impaled. Every element of this is deliberate. He is not losing his temper. He is composing a message in the only language he is certain they will not misread, the language of power made visible and physical, the language he learned in Edirne, watching the Ottomans themselves deploy it against those who forgot their place. He is fluent in this language. He has been studying it since he was 11 years old. The message lands in Constantinople with the weight of an irreversible decision, because that is precisely what it is. There is no diplomatic path back from impaled envoys. Vlad knows this. He has chosen it knowing this. The question worth dwelling on is why a man of his intelligence, a man who has survived by reading situations with almost preternatural accuracy, would choose to make an enemy of the most powerful empire in the known world at this particular moment, in this particular way? The answer is his father. The answer is always, in some sense, his father. Vlad Dracul was a careful man. He was a pragmatist in the tradition of small state rulers everywhere. Men who understand that survival requires flexibility, that alliances shift, that the only constant is the need to remain useful to whoever holds the larger sword. He navigated between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire for years with the skill of a man walking a rope over an abyss. He paid the tribute. He sent his sons as hostages. He accommodated and compromised and calculated. And in 1447, he was murdered anyway, almost certainly with the knowledge and complicity of John Hunyadi, the man whose interests he had spent years trying not to threaten. The boy Vlad received this news in Edion, across the lines of the empire that held him. His father's careful arithmetic had produced a corpse. This is what Vlad III is refusing when he refuses the tribute. He is refusing the premise that accommodation produces safety. He has a data point that accommodation produces a slower ruin with better manners. And he has decided the father's calculation was not merely unfortunate, but structurally wrong. That a small state which accepts its subordination only purchases the right to be consumed at a time and pace of its master's choosing. The tribute system is not a guarantee of survival. It is the mechanism of a gradual erasure. Every year the silver goes south. Every year the boys go south. Wallachia becomes slightly less itself and slightly more a province waiting to be formally annexed. Vlad has looked at this trajectory and decided he would rather burn the map than follow it to its conclusion. There is something almost classical in the logic. The Ottomans will understand this choice, even as they move to punish it. Mehmed II, who has read men the way other commanders read terrain, will understand it precisely. He will file it. He has campaigns elsewhere. Wallachia is an irritant. The patience he brings to Vlad's defiance in these years is not indifference. It is the patience of a man who knows he will eventually have time for every problem and who does not wish to hurry. But Vlad is not content to wait for Mehmed's patience to expire. He is constitutionally incapable of waiting. In the winter of 1461 to 1462, he crosses the Danube. What follows is not a raid in any conventional sense of that word. It is a campaign of destruction across hundreds of kilometers of Ottoman-held Bulgaria, conducted with the systematic thoroughness of a man who wants the damage to be impossible to minimize or ignore. Towns burn. Garrisons are overwhelmed. The dead accumulate in numbers that will be disputed by historians for centuries, but that are, by any honest accounting, staggering. Vlad moves through the Ottoman frontier like a man who understands he is writing something, not merely fighting someone, that the scale of the violence is the point, that the Ottomans must be made to feel, in their Bulgarian territories, something of what Wallachia has felt for generations beneath the grinding weight of tribute and subordination. And then he writes the letter. The letter to Matthias Corvinus is one of the most remarkable documents of the 15th century, and it is remarkable precisely because of what it is not. It is not a plea, it is not a boast in the ordinary sense. It is a catalogue, a meticulous, almost bureaucratic enumeration of the dead, organized by category, rendered with the flat precision of a military accountant closing his ledgers at the end of a fiscal quarter. So many Turks killed in this district, so many in that town, so many burned, so many drowned, so many impaled. The numbers are specific. The language is composed. There is no trembling in it, no exultation, no apparent awareness that the thing being described is anything other than a transaction completed according to agreed terms. This is the register of a man who has decided that the only way to force Matthias Corvinus into action is to make the war so visible, so quantified, so undeniable in its scale that the King of Hungary cannot remain a spectator without appearing, before God and before Christendom to have chosen passivity in the face of an opportunity. Vlad is attempting to conjure a crusading coalition through sheer audacity. He is trying to make his private war into Europe's war, to make the mathematics of Ottoman threat so obvious and so freshly demonstrated that Matthias will have no choice but to march south with the full weight of Hungarian arms. It is a brilliant calculation. It is also, in ways that Vlad cannot fully see from where he is standing, the instrument of his eventual destruction. Because Matthias Corvinus is not a crusader. He is a king, which is to say he is a man whose decisions are made not in the register of holy obligation, but in the register of strategic advantage. He watches what Vlad has done in Bulgaria with the attention of a man calculating what it costs him. A Wallachian voivode who has just massacred tens of thousands of Ottoman subjects and sent the bill to the King of Hungary as a kind of invoice. This is not an ally. This is a liability. This is a man who has just made a war that Matthias has not chosen, and who is now standing in the doorway of that war and holding out his hand. The letter, so carefully composed, so precise in its accounting, will eventually be answered, but not with armies. The answer will come years later, in a Transylvanian dungeon, and the letter itself, or something very like it, may be the instrument used to justify what Matthias does. None of this is visible yet. The irony is still gathering, still building toward the moment of its release. For now, there is only the winter of 1461 to 1462, and the reports traveling south to Constantinople, and Mehmed II reading them in the way that a man of his intelligence reads everything, not for the surface of the information, but for what the information reveals about the mind that produces it. What he reads is this: a man who is not afraid of him. A man who has crossed the Danube not in desperation, but in calculation. Who has killed at a scale designed to provoke a specific response. Who has sent a letter to the King of Hungary with the composure of a man filing a report. Mehmed has spent his career among men who feared him. He conquered Constantinople at the age of 21, and the fear that conquest produced has been the atmosphere he has breathed ever since, useful, clarifying, a form of power in itself. Vlad does not breathe it. Vlad grew up inside the empire that produces the fear, and he was inoculated against it by proximity. He knows what the Ottomans are made of. He knows their tactics, their psychology, their weaknesses, their habits of mind. He has known these things since childhood, and the knowledge has produced not terror, but something closer to cold strategic clarity. This, perhaps more than the body count in Bulgaria, is what makes Mehmed's decision feel inevitable. You can absorb a military raid. You can absorb the loss of territory, the killing of soldiers, the burning of towns. These are the ordinary costs of empire, and they can be repaired. What you cannot absorb, if you are the conqueror of Constantinople and your authority rests in part on the perception of your invincibility, is the spectacle of a client prince who is simply not frightened of you. That spectacle, left unaddressed, is a disease. It spreads. Every other client state, every other tribute-paying principality, every other voivode and king and sultan watching from the margins of the Ottoman world will draw conclusions from what Wallachia does and what Constantinople does in response. Mehmed makes his decision with the quality of inevitability about it. He will go himself. He will not delegate this. A problem of this visibility, a provocation of this explicitness, cannot be handed to a subordinate without implying that the Sultan himself considers it beneath his personal attention. And that implication would cost more than the campaign itself. He will take the largest army he has assembled since the walls of Constantinople came down. He will go north in the spring of 1462, across the Danube, into the forests and river plains of Wallachia, and he will end this. The forces begin assembling. The logistics of moving 60,000 men, or 100,000 or more, require months of preparation, and the preparation itself is a form of message. It travels north ahead of the army. It arrives in Targovite before the first Ottoman soldier has crossed the Danube. Vlad receives it. He has perhaps 30,000 men. He has a country of thin wealth and deep forests, of river crossings and marshy plains, of modest towns and a population that has been living under his rule long enough to understand what obedience to him costs and what disobedience costs more. He has his own mind, which is the most dangerous weapon in this entire equation and the one that Mehmed, for all his intelligence, has not yet fully accounted for. And he has a plan that is not a plan in the conventional military sense, not a disposition of forces, not a defensive line, not a fortified position to be held. It is something older and stranger and more terrible than any of those things. He is going to unmake his own country. He is going to strip it of everything an invading army needs to survive. Food, water, shelter, livestock, the basic material of sustenance, and leave Mehmed's vast force to march through a landscape that has been deliberately, systematically reduced to nothing. He will burn what cannot be moved. He will poison what cannot be burned. He will drive the people into the forests, away from the roads the Ottomans will use, so that there is no population to conscript, no grain to requisition, no well that has not been fouled. He will give Mehmed a country that has been hollowed out from the inside, a beautiful and terrible emptiness where Wallachia used to be. It is a form of love in its way, a savage and unrecognizable form, but love nonetheless. The love of a man who is willing to destroy what he is trying to protect because the alternative is to let someone else destroy it more completely and more permanently. Whether the people of Wallachia experience it as love is another question entirely, and it is the question that will eventually undo him. A ruler who governs through fear and asks his people to suffer for his vision of their freedom is making a very large assumption about the relationship between his vision and their endurance. The structural problem is still waiting. It has been waiting patiently, and the spring of 1462 is when it begins to move. The orders go out in the spring. Not in chaos, not in the fog of an army in retreat, but in the precise and deliberate language of a man who has thought this through to its conclusion and found the conclusion acceptable. Burn the granaries, poison the wells, drive the cattle into the deep forest. Take what can be carried and leave nothing that an army of 100,000 men might use to sustain itself in the field. The orders are Vlad's. The hands that carry them out belong to his own people. And the country that is unmade in the weeks before Mehmed II crosses the Danube is not an enemy country. It is Wallachia. It is the thing Vlad has fought for, imprisoned for, survived for. He is destroying it himself, and he is doing so with the cold arithmetic of a man who understands that the only way to save a thing is sometimes to make it worthless to the person who wants to take it from you. This is not heroism in any comfortable sense. History is full of commanders who have burned bridges, flooded valleys, collapsed passes. But what Vlad orders in the spring and early summer of 1462 is something different in its scale and its deliberateness. It is not a military operation conducted against an enemy. It is a campaign conducted against geography itself, against the land's capacity to feed and water and shelter an invading force. Every well that is fouled, every field that is put to the torch, every road stripped of every resource that might make a long march survivable. These are not acts of war in the conventional sense. They are acts of subtraction. Vlad is not fighting Mehmed's army. He is fighting Mehmed's army's stomach. The mathematics of the situation demand nothing less. When the Ottoman force crosses the Danube in June of 1462, it brings with it a logistical problem of almost incomprehensible magnitude. An army of 60,000 men requires thousands of tons of food and fodder every week simply to remain operational. It requires water in quantities that strain the capacity of any river or well system along its line of march. It requires the kind of continuous resupply that only a friendly or at least a neutral countryside can provide. Mehmed understands this. His quartermaster corps understands this. The Ottoman military machine is, by the standards of the 15th century, extraordinarily well organized, and it has crossed into hostile territory before. But it has never crossed into territory that has been prepared for its arrival in quite this way. It has never marched through a country that has already been consumed by its own defender. The Balkan summer is not neutral in this contest. It is Vlad's ally, and he knows it. June in Wallachia is heat that rises from the river plains in visible waves, that turns the roads to dust and fills the lungs with it, that drives men and horses to water sources that are no longer there. The Ottoman column that moves north from the Danube does not encounter resistance in the form of formed troops blocking the road. It encounters absence. It encounters the specific and maddening silence of a country from which everything useful has been removed. Burned foundations where villages stood a week ago. Wells that smell of death when you lower the bucket. Fields of ash where wheat was growing. The cattle are gone. The people are gone. The road runs through a landscape that looks like the aftermath of a catastrophe that has not yet happened. But it is happening to the people who lived here. It is important to hold that thought, to resist the temptation to let the military logic of Vlad's strategy swallow the human reality of its execution. The families who are driven into the forests in the weeks before the Ottoman advance. They are not abstractions. They are carrying what they can carry, which is not much. They are leaving behind the stores that will see them through the winter, the houses their fathers built, the fields they have worked since childhood. They are doing this because Vlad's officers have told them to, and because the alternative is to be in the path of an Ottoman army, which is its own kind of instruction. They move into the tree line with their children and their fear and whatever flour and salt and dried meat they have managed to bundle into cloth. And behind them, the smoke rises, and it is their smoke, the smoke of their own lives burning, and no one has asked them whether this bargain is one they old choose. They have no particular ideology about Wallachian independence. They have a roof, or they had one, and they have a harvest, or they had one, and now they have neither. And the man responsible for the absence of both is the man who is supposed to be protecting them. This is a thought that does not announce itself loudly in the spring of 1462. It does not organize itself into opposition or resistance or political grievance. It simply sits in the minds of 10,000 displaced families as they huddle in the forests while the smoke of their villages drifts over the treetops. It sits there quietly, the way a debt sits, the way a cold sits in the chest before it becomes something worse. It is not yet dangerous. It is only waiting. Inside the Ottoman column, the experience of the unmade countryside accumulates like a physical weight. Tursun Beg is there. He is a court historian, which means he is not in the habit of recording failure, but what he witnesses in the Wallachian summer is so far outside the expected shape of a campaign that even the conventions of Ottoman court historiography cannot entirely contain it. He records the heat. He records the disease that moves through the column as the water sources fail or are found fouled. He records the harassment, the Wallachian cavalry that appears on the flanks of the march, strikes and vanishes before a response can be organized, the way a man might strike at a hornet's nest and be gone before the hornets have decided which direction to fly. Vlad's cavalry does not fight pitched engagements. It does not have to. It kills stragglers. It destroys supply wagons. It appears at dusk on a ridge and is gone by the time the Ottoman cavalry has saddled. It is not trying to stop the advance. It is trying to exhaust it. Mahmud Pasha rides near the head of the column. He is a capable man, one of the most capable in Mehmed's service, and he understands professionally what is being done to him. He understands that the enemy has chosen the terrain of this campaign with great care, that the terrain is not primarily geographical, but logistical, and that every day the column spends in this burned and emptied country is a day that costs the army something it cannot easily replace. He confers with Ishak Pasha. They are competent men operating in conditions that have been specifically engineered to defeat competence. There is a particular frustration in that. The frustration of a craftsman given bad tools, except that the tools are men who are hungry and thirsty and sick, and the craftsman is responsible for their lives, and the horizon keeps offering nothing but more ash and more silence and more of this terrible, deliberate absence. The column moves north toward Targovinte. It wins every engagement it can force. There are no engagements it can force that matter. Vlad's forces do not stand and fight. They burn and vanish, and the column moves through the residue of its own frustrated victories toward a capital that may or may not be defended, through a country that feels less like a territory being subdued and more like a trap being sprung in slow motion over days and weeks too. Oh, large and too carefully constructed to see whole until you are already inside it. Mehmed rides at the center of his army, and he watches all of this with the attention of a man who has conquered Constantinople, who has broken the last remnant of Rome, who has bent the logic of European geopolitics to his will through a combination of military genius and political patience that has no equal in his age. He is not a man who is easily frightened. He is not a man who is easily surprised, but he is being surprised now. And the surprise has the specific quality of an intellectual surprise, the kind that comes not from encountering something you could not have imagined, but from encountering something you imagined as a theoretical possibility and dismissed as too extreme for any actual human being to execute against his own people and his own land. Vlad has not dismissed it. Vlad has done it. And the doing of it is reshaping the campaign in ways that Mehmed's plans did not account for. What Mehmed is beginning to understand, riding north through the ash and the heat, is that he is not fighting a conventional enemy. He is not fighting a man who wants to hold territory, or protect population centers, or preserve the infrastructure of a functioning state. He is fighting a man who has already decided that none of those things matter as much as the single objective of making Wallachia ungovernable for an Ottoman army, and who has demonstrated his commitment to that objective by destroying the things that most rulers would consider the entire point of ruling: the crops, the villages, the people's capacity to survive the winter. Vlad has burned all of it. And the burning is not the act of a man who has lost control of the situation. It is the act of a man who is in complete control of the situation and has decided that this is what control looks like. This is the thing that costs Mehmed something beyond soldiers and supplies. It costs him the certainty that his categories apply. He has categories for resistance. He has categories for defensive warfare, for scorched earth as a tactic of last resort, for the desperation of a smaller force facing annihilation. What he does not have a category for is this: for a ruler who has chosen, with apparent equanimity, to unmake his own country rather than allow it to be taken, and who has done so not in desperation, but in what appears to be cold strategic clarity. The clarity is more unsettling than the destruction he could understand. The clarity is something else. The column reaches the outskirts of Targovinte, and the city is silent. No defenders on the walls, no delegation coming out to negotiate, no flags, no smoke, no sound. Just the empty city sitting in the Wallachian summer heat, and beyond it, the fields. And in the fields, something that the Ottoman chroniclers will struggle to describe adequately, something that requires a vocabulary. The 15th century does not quite possess for the thing a human mind does when it encounters the outer boundary of what human beings are capable of doing to other Borlias, or man beings. Because this is what Vlad has understood from the beginning. The destruction of the countryside is not the strategy, it is the preparation. It is the first movement of a composition that has been scored for one specific instrument. Not an army, not a countryside, not a logistical calculation, but a single man riding at the center of 100,000 soldiers, who is beginning to understand that he has been led here deliberately. That he rode, he has followed through the ash, And the silence has been laid out for him by someone who knows him, who has studied him, who has spent 20 years learning the shape of his mind, and is now using that shape against him. Mehmed II is not a stupid man. He understands what is happening to his army. He understands that he is being led through a deliberately constructed hell by a man who knows exactly where the exits are and has no intention of showing them to him. The heat and the disease and the empty wells and the phantom cavalry and the burned villages. All of it has been arranged the way a room is arranged for a specific guest, the way a trap is arranged for a specific animal. He has been the guest. He has been the animal. And what he does not yet understand, what he will not understand until the night of June 16th gives way to June 17th, is that the destruction of the countryside is only the first layer of what Vlad has prepared for him. The second layer is already moving. It is moving in the dark, on horseback, with fire and steel, and the specific and personal intention of ending this campaign, the only way Vlad has ever believed it could truly be ended. Not by defeating the army, by killing the man at its center. The darkness is coming. And it is coming for the Sultan. Between 7,000 and 10,000 horses move through the night without torches. This is the first thing to understand. There is no light. Vlad has forbidden it. The cavalry advances through the June darkness, guided by men who know this terrain, the way a man knows his own house, by memory, by instinct, by the particular way the ground changes underfoot as the forest opens toward the river plain. The Ottoman encampment lies ahead, vast and luminous with its own fires, a city of canvas and cook smoke spread across the darkness like a second constellation. The riders can see it long before they reach it. They do not hurry. Hurry makes sound. Sound makes death. This is not a raid. Vlad has been absolutely clear about what this is. A raid takes what it can and withdraws. A raid measures success in horses stolen, supplies burned, sentries killed. This is something categorically different. This is a decapitation. The objective is a single tent, occupied by a single man, and every decision made in the planning of this operation, the timing, the formation, the uniforms, the approach routes, the signal protocols, flows from that single operational reality. Reach Mehmed II. Kill him. The campaign ends at its source. That Vlad knows where the tent is constitutes the first miracle of the night, and it is not a miracle at all. It is the product of 15 years of accumulated knowledge, carried in the mind of a man who was introduced to Ottoman military culture as a child prisoner and never stopped studying it. The geometry of an Ottoman military encampment is not arbitrary. It is a form as precise and deliberate as architecture, governed by protocols that have been refined across decades of campaign. The Sultan's tent occupies a specific relationship to the camp center, to the janissary quarters, to the horse lines, to the command pavilions of the senior pashas. The approach routes to it are partially defined by what surrounds it. The concentric rings of hierarchy that Ottoman military organization places between the supreme commander and any enemy who might reach for him. Vlad knows the geometry. He spent years inside it. He knows where the janissaries sleep and where they do not. He knows the patrol rhythms, the challenge protocols, the response sequence when a night alarm is raised in the outer perimeter versus the inner camp. He knows how long it takes a disciplined Ottoman formation to organize itself in darkness and confusion. He has calculated that interval with precision. That interval is the window. The uniforms are perhaps the most revealing detail of the entire operation. A portion of Vlad's penetration force rides in Ottoman dress. The intelligence required to make this possible, the specific garments, the insignia, the equipment that would distinguish Ottoman cavalry from Wallachian cavalry to a sentry in firelight, is not the kind of intelligence that can be gathered in a week or a month. It is the residue of years. A man who spent his adolescence in Edirne watching Ottoman soldiers does not merely remember their faces, he remembers their clothes. He remembers the cut of a Sipahi's coat, and the way a janissary carries his weapon, and the particular way Ottoman cavalry moves in column when it is not in battle formation. He has dressed his riders in that memory. He has made his enemy's costume into a weapon. This is what captivity looks like when it is survived by someone who refuses to be only a captive. Every indignity absorbed in Edirne, every year of enforced proximity to the empire that held him, is being repaid tonight in a currency Mehmed II does not yet know is in circulation. The outer perimeter falls faster than it should. The Ottoman sentries are tired. The army has been marching through a landscape that Vlad has spent weeks systematically destroying. The poisoned wells, the burned villages, the drove roads emptied of livestock, the crops reduced to ash before the Ottoman advance can feed itself from them. These men are not at the peak of their readiness. They are the soldiers of a campaign that was supposed to be easy, and it has not been easy. And the accumulated exhaustion of marching through a country that has made itself into a desert is written in the way they stand at their posts in the June darkness. The disguised riders move through the outer line. Then the fires begin. The signal is fire, and once it starts, it cannot be stopped. The night ruptures. Tursun Beg, the Ottoman chronicler who was present in the camp and who will write about this night with a candor remarkable for a court historian whose professional obligation is to the Sultan's glory, records the chaos with the specific texture of a man who experienced it rather than reconstructed from reports. He does not reach for metaphor. He describes what he sees: the fires, the horses screaming, the collapse of organized response in the first critical minutes, the way darkness becomes an active weapon when it is filled with the sound of men who do not know where the threat is coming from. An army of 60,000 or 100,000 or 150,000 men is not automatically more capable in a night attack than a smaller force. In some ways, it is less capable. The very size of the camp means that alarm cannot travel instantaneously from the perimeter to the center. The very density of men and horses and tents means that organized response requires time, and time is precisely what Vlad has calculated he does not need to give them. The penetration force drives toward the center, toward the Sultan's tent. This is the hinge of the entire operation, and the narration of what happens in these minutes must be held at close range, because what happens in these minutes is not a story about armies. It is a story about seconds. Mahmud Pasha is awake. Whether he heard something before the fires began, or whether the first sounds of the attack reach him early because of where his command pavilion sits in the camp's hierarchy, he responds faster than the attack anticipated. This is the first deviation from the plan. Mahmud Pasha is one of Mehmed's most capable commanders, a man of considerable military intelligence who has spent years in the service of an empire that produces capable commanders in quantity. He does not freeze, he organizes. In the dark and the chaos and the screaming of horses, he begins to assemble a response in the vicinity of the Sultan's tent before Vlad's cavalry can complete the penetration. He is nearly killed in the process. The distance between Mahmud Pasha and death on the night of June 16th to 17th, 1462, is not measured in minutes. It is measured in the particular way a horse shies at the wrong moment, in the way a Wallachian blade finds air instead of flesh, in the accumulated chance of a few seconds in the dark. He survives. His survival is not a testimony to his skill, though his skill is real. It is accident. It is the irreducible luck that governs the difference between the historical record and the world that might have been. Ishak Pasha is also nearly reached. Two of the senior Ottoman commanders in the camp come within the margin of chance from death on this night, and the fact that both survive does not diminish what the fact of their near deaths reveals. Vlad's force is inside the camp's inner ring. It is close enough to the command structure that senior men are drawing weapons in the dark. The penetration has succeeded to a degree that should not have been possible against an army this size, and it has succeeded because the man who planned it spent his formative years learning exactly where the gaps would be, but the Sultan's tent is not reached. This is the fact that history records, and the narration must hold it without deflation, because the failure is not a failure of conception. It is the friction of war meeting the limits of the possible. Vlad's force cannot hold directional cohesion in a camp 10 times its size, in the dark, against a defense that is now recovering. The fires that were meant to illuminate the path to the center are also illuminating the Wallachian riders. The Ottoman response, slower than it should have been, is organizing faster than the plan required. The penetration force encounters Mehmed's Janissary Guard in sufficient numbers that forward movement becomes impossible without a pitched engagement that would destroy the cavalry before it could withdraw. The cavalry is redirected. This is the hinge point, not a defeat, not a collapse. The operational reality overtaking the operational genius, as it always eventually does, as it must, because war is not a plan. War is a plan encountering everything the plan did not account for, and the measure of the plan is how much it survives that encounter. Vlad's cavalry withdraws into the darkness it came from. The fires burn behind them. The camp is in controlled chaos, the kind of chaos that a disciplined army can manage, and the Ottomans are disciplined. By the time the Wallachian riders reach the tree line, the Ottoman response has achieved coherence. The pursuit is real, but it does not extend far into the forest. The forest belongs to Vlad in a way it does not belong to the Ottoman cavalry, and every Ottoman commander who has spent the last weeks watching the landscape ahead of them burn and empty understands this instinctively. The pursuit stops at the trees. The casualties on both sides are recorded with the imprecision that attends all medieval military accounting. What is not imprecise is this: the attack kills somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 Ottoman soldiers. It wounds more. It terrifies an army that was not supposed to know fear on this campaign. Tursun Beg, writing afterward, reaches for language adequate to what he witnessed and does not quite find it. The terror was real, he records. The disorder was real. The closeness of it was real. He is a court historian, and even he cannot fully domesticate what happened in that camp into the narrative of Ottoman inevitability that his professional role requires him to sustain. In the grey light of June 17th, the camp reassembles itself. The fires are out. The wounded have been moved. The dead are counted, and the count is not comfortable. The Wallachian cavalry has withdrawn into the forests, and the forests have closed behind them. Mehmed II is alive and in command. The Ottoman army is intact. The military balance, by any conventional measure, remains precisely what it was the night before. A vastly superior force still faces a smaller one. The campaign continues. On the surface, nothing has changed. But Tursun Beg records something in his account of the morning after that deserves to be held carefully and read slowly. He records that Mehmed II looked at the camp around him, the extinguished fires, the reorganized formations, the evidence of what the night had produced, and said little. The Conqueror of Constantinople, the man who had reduced the walls of the greatest city in a Christian world with cannon and will and mathematical certainty, who had campaigned across Greece and Serbia and Anatolia with the confidence of a civilization that believed history had already decided in its favor. This man looked at his camp on the morning of June 17, 1462, and was quiet in a way that his chronicler noticed and recorded. Silence from a sultan is not neutral. Silence from a sultan is information. Something has moved. It has moved in the space between Mehmed and his own sense of invulnerability, quiet and irreversible, in the way that certain experiences move things in a man that cannot be moved back. He has spent the night in proximity to his own death, in a way that no military campaign in his life has previously produced. Not because the threat was larger than what he has faced before. It was not. But because it was intimate, because it came from a man who knew him, who knew where he slept and how his camp was organized and what his guards would do and how long they would take to organize, who had learned all of this as a child prisoner in Edirne and had carried the knowledge for 20 years, patient and precise, waiting for the moment to use it. Mehmed has faced enemies who were stronger. He has never faced an enemy who understood him this completely and used that understanding as the primary weapon. Mahmud Pasha, who was alive this morning by the margin of a horse's shying in the dark, understands something that Mehmed does not yet fully articulate. He understands it from the inside of the experience, from the specific sensation of having been nearly reached in the confusion of that camp. He knows what Vlad is capable of. He knows how Vlad thinks. He knows that the night attack was not desperation. It was the second layer of a plan whose first layer was the scorched earth, the burned villages, the poisoned wells, the emptied countryside, and that a man capable of conceiving both layers in sequence as a unified strategic architecture is not a man who has exhausted his ideas. Mahmud Pasha carries this knowledge forward into the days ahead, and it will shape the way the Ottoman command approaches everything that follows. It will make them careful in a way that Ottoman armies are not accustomed to being careful. That carefulness has a cost. The army begins to move toward Targovinte. The city lies ahead, the capital of Wallachia, the seat of the voivode's power, the objective that Mehmed has defined as the campaign's terminus. The forests are quiet on either side of the road. The wells along the route have been poisoned or destroyed. The villages are empty and burned. The landscape continues to be what it has been since the army crossed the Danube, a country that has unmade itself rather than submit to being taken. The army marches through it in the particular silence of men who are beginning to understand that the enemy they are facing has prepared something for them at the end of this road. They do not know what it is. They know only that the man who poisoned the wells and burned the crops and led 7,000 horsemen through the dark toward the Sultan's tent has had weeks to prepare the arrival, and that his preparations have not yet failed to produce exactly what he intended them to produce. The worst is still ahead, and in the quiet of June 17th, in the grey light of a camp that has survived the night and does not yet know what survival has cost it, Mehmed II is already inside it, moving towards something he cannot name and cannot stop, because the road leads only forward and the forests on either side of it belong to Vlad. The army moves north through the last days of June with the particular exhaustion of a force that has won every engagement and taken no ground. The Danube crossing is 3 weeks behind them. The night attack is 4 days behind them. The dead are buried or left where they fell, and the living carry water from wells that have been tested and retested, because the wells before these were poisoned, and the wells before those were poisoned, and somewhere in the chain of command the understanding has settled in, wordlessly and completely. Why? That nothing in this country can be trusted to be what it appears to be. The grain is ash. The livestock are gone. The villages are empty shells, their interiors stripped to the timber, and even the timber sometimes burned. Mehmed's army is the largest force the Ottomans have put into Europe since Constantinople, and it marches through Wallachia like a hand closing around smoke. Targovinte appears in the distance on a morning that the chroniclers do not trouble to describe, because the sky and the light are not what anyone will remember. What they will remember is the gates. The city gates stand open, not broken, not burned, not battered from any siege. Simply open, swung wide, as if in welcome, as if the city has been waiting for exactly this army and has prepared for its arrival with the hospitality of a host who has removed every piece of furniture from the ruins. The walls are intact. The towers are standing. A city of this size and consequence in the middle of the 15th century represents decades of accumulated wealth, accumulated labor, accumulated human life, and it stands before the Ottoman advance in perfect structural condition and offers nothing, not resistance, not surrender, not even the dignity of a locked door. The advance riders go in first. This is procedure, and procedure is what holds an army together when everything else is dissolving. They ride through the open gates and into the streets, and the streets are empty, and the markets are bare, and the churches have been stripped of. Whatever could be carried, and whatever could not be carried, has been rendered useless. The city is not ruined, it is vacated. There is a difference, and the difference matters, because a ruined city tells you that a battle was fought here, that something was defended and lost, that the human calculus of resistance played out to its conclusion. A vacated city tells you something else entirely. It tells you that the person you are pursuing has thought further ahead than you have. It tells you that you are not the one determining the terms of this engagement. It tells you that you have marched for 3 weeks through a country that has been systematically unmade ahead of you, and you have arrived at its capital, and the capital has been unmade as well, and there is nothing left to conquer because there is nothing left to find. The riders come back. The army stops, and then the reports begin to arrive from the fields beyond the city's northern walls, and the army does not move again for a long time. Tursun Beg is with the army. He is a man of education and precision, a court historian whose professional obligation is to record the Sultan's campaigns in language that reflects well on the Sultan's glory and the empire's inevitable expansion. He is not a man given to doubt or to the kind of honesty that embarrasses his patrons. And yet, what he writes about the days outside Târgovente is the most candid account of Ottoman vulnerability in the entire campaign, because Tursun Beg is also a man who understands that some things cannot be managed by the conventions of court history, that some things require a witness, that the future will need to know what happened here even if the knowing is uncomfortable. He writes what he sees. He writes what the army sees. He writes because he is present and because he cannot pretend otherwise. What the army sees takes time to understand. The stakes begin close to the road and extend outward, and the eye follows them as the eye follows anything that does not resolve into comprehensibility, searching for the edge, searching for the boundary where the thing ends and the ordinary world resumes. There is no edge. The field extends. The stakes extend with it. Each one is perhaps 3 meters tall, sharpened, and set at an angle that the craftsman of this work, and it is craft. It is organized and deliberate and executed with the precision of a man who has thought carefully about the geometry of maximum visibility, have calculated to make the figures mount, add on them visible from the greatest possible distance. They are Ottoman soldiers. They are Ottoman envoys. They are the men captured in the raids along the Danube, the men taken in the skirmishes along the road north, the men who rode into Wallachian ambushes and did not ride out. They are arranged by rank, or what can be determined of rank, and Tursun Beg records this detail with a kind of stunned precision, as if the organizational principle is the thing that most requires documentation. The highest ranking are at the center. The lowest are at the periphery. It is a court in negative, a hierarchy of the dead arranged according to the same protocols that govern the living, and it stretches for kilometers through the fields outside Târgovite in the grey June light. The estimates will vary across the centuries. 20,000, 30,000. The numbers are perhaps less important than the fact that every man who looks at this field loses the ability to count, because the mind that is trying to count is also trying to refuse what the eyes are reporting, and these two processes cannot happen simultaneously. Tursun Beg does not give a number. He gives a response. He records that the Sultan looked upon this field and was moved to an emotion that the historian, for all his precision, cannot quite resolve into a single word. Some sources say Mehmed wept. Some say he fell silent with a silence that was different from ordinary silence. Some say he spoke, and what he spoke was not the language of a conqueror assessing a tactical situation, but something older and quieter, something that belongs to the part of a man that exists before he becomes a sultan or a conqueror or the heir of Rome and Byzantium and every ambition the 15th century can contain. The ambiguity is the point. The Conqueror of Constantinople is a man who has built his identity on the ability to look at impossible things and calculate them. He is 30 years old, and he has already done what his father and his grandfather and every Ottoman sultan before him could not do. He has taken the city that the world said could not be taken, and he has taken it not through luck or through numbers, but through engineering and patience, and the refusal to accept that the walls of Constantinople were anything other than a problem to be solved. He is a man for whom the impossible is a category to be emptied, one achievement at a time. And he stands before this field, and the field is outside his categories, not because of the scale, though the scale is staggering, not because of the cruelty, though the cruelty is extraordinary even by the standards of an age in which cruelty is an instrument of statecraft, but because of what it means. Because someone has done this on purpose, with forethought, with calculation, for him specifically, has built this thing knowing that Mehmed II would stand before it, and has designed it to reach past the Sultan and touch the man. Vlad knows Mehmed. He has known him for 20 years, since the years in Edirne when two boys circled each other in the complicated intimacy of captivity and proximity. He knows how Mehmed thinks. He knows what Mehmed fears, or what Mehmed would fear if Mehmed allowed himself to fear anything. And he has built this field accordingly. It is not a defense. It cannot stop an army. It is a message, written in the only language that Mehmed cannot dismiss. And the message is this: you are not the most dangerous thing in these forests. You never were. And every man who follows you can see that I know it. The army stands before the field for a long time. Officers do not give orders. Men do not speak. The horses are uneasy. The June light moves across the stakes and across the figures on the stakes and across the faces of 60,000 or 80,000 or 100,000 soldiers who have fought in Greece and Serbia and Anatolia and along every frontier of the empire's expansion, and none of them have seen this. Because this has not existed before. Vlad has invented it. Or rather, he has taken something that has existed in the repertoire of Wallachian punishment and scaled it to a dimension that converts it from execution into argument. He has made philosophy out of atrocity. He has made a statement that will outlast every document, every letter, every diplomatic correspondence, because it cannot be misread and it cannot be forgotten by anyone who sees it. Mehmed gives the order to turn the army around. The order is not given as retreat. Retreat is not a word available to the Conqueror of Constantinople. Not in front of his commanders, not in front of the Janissaries who have followed him through every campaign of his reign. The order is given as strategy, as the considered decision of a sultan who has achieved his objectives and determined that the installation of a compliant voivode is more efficient than the continued expenditure of men and supply on a campaign that the landscape itself has refused to cooperate with. This is the political performance, and it fools no one present. The commanders understand, the Janissaries understand, Tursun Beg understands, and Tursun Beg writes it down with the careful neutrality of a man who knows that what he is recording is a defeat, and who also knows that he will not call it that because he is a court historian and not a suicide. Radu the Handsome rides near the center of the Ottoman column. He has been there for weeks, traveling with the army that has come to install him, waiting with the patience of a man who has learned patience in the same school his brother attended and drawn entirely different lessons from it. He is 26 years old, and he is beautiful, and he is pliant, and he is everything that Vlad is not, and this is precisely his value. Mehmed does not need a Wallachia that fights. He needs a Wallachia that pays. He needs a Wallachia that sits between Hungary and the Danube, and does not require further military expeditions. A Wallachia governed by a man who understands that Ottoman-backed stability is not servitude, but survival, that the tribute is not humiliation, but the price of existing in the space between empires. Radu understands all of this. He has understood it since Edirne, since the years when his brother was studying the Ottomans as enemies, and Radu was studying them as the future. He is the mechanism by which Mehmed converts retreat into transaction, the face-saving logic that allows the march back toward the Danube to be described in the chronicles as a successful transfer of Wallachian governance rather than an army turning its back on a field of stakes and walking away. The boyars are already calculating. They have been calculating since before the Ottoman army crossed the Danube, and they have been calculating faster since the night attack, and they have been calculating fastest since the reports from the fields outside Targovinte began to arrive in the places where boyars gather to calculate. Vlad has held them through terror for 6 years. He has impaled their colleagues and burned their estates and broken the old arrangements by which the boyar class managed Wallachian politics from behind whatever voivode happened to occupy the throne. He has made himself the only power in Wallachia, and in doing so, he has made himself the only target. And the boyars are men who have survived by knowing when a target is becoming untenable. Radu offers them something Vlad cannot offer, a future in which they are still alive and still relevant and still in possession of the lands and privileges that define their existence. The arithmetic is not complicated. It never was. This is the final truth of the Forest of Stakes, and it is the truth that Vlad cannot escape, and perhaps does not try to escape, because a man who builds such a thing has already made his accounting with the future. The act that stops Mehmed II is the same act that makes Vlad's own survival impossible, not because it is too cruel. Cruelty is the common currency of the age, and Mehmed II has burned cities and enslaved populations, and done the arithmetic of conquest with a thoroughness that makes Vlad's Wallachian campaigns look parochial. But because it is too complete, because it uses up every resource that fear can generate in a single gesture, because a ruler who has governed through terror discovers, in the moment of his supreme effectiveness, that terror is not an inexhaustible supply. It is a finite thing. You can spend it once, magnificently, and stop an army. Or you can spend it slowly, over years, and hold a country. You cannot do both. Vlad has spent it all here, in these fields, on these stakes, in this message to Mehmed that says, I see you, and I am not afraid, and I will burn everything I have before I let you have it. The army moves south. The stakes stand. The June light continues to move across them, unhurried, indifferent, the way light moves across everything that human beings build and destroy and build again in their brief and violent occupation of the earth. The field outside Targovinte is not a victory, and it is not a defeat. It is a masterpiece. And, like most masterpieces, it costs its maker everything, because the world that receives it is not large enough to contain both the work and the man who made it. And so the world keeps the work and discards the man and moves on. Vlad watches the Ottoman column diminish toward the south, from wherever he watches it, from the forests, from the hills, from the network of scouts and riders that has been his eyes throughout this campaign. He has done what he set out to do. He has made the price of Wallachia higher than Mehmed II is willing to pay. He has proven that a small principality with no great walls and no great army and no great patron can stand against the largest force in Europe through intelligence and nerve and the willingness to be, in the end, more frightening than the thing that is frightening you. He has won. And the boyars are already riding toward Radu, and the throne that Vlad has bled to hold is already dissolving beneath him, and the forests that hid his army and swallowed Mehmed's advance riders are about to become the forests he flees through, north toward Transylvania and the uncertain mercy of M4. At Theus Corvinus, you cannot build a forest of 20,000 impaled human beings and then ask the people who watched you build it to trust you with their future. This is not a paradox. It is a law, as reliable as any law the 15th century produces, as reliable as the law that says every buffer state will eventually be consumed by one of the forces pressing against it, as reliable as the law that says fear, deployed as governance, eats its way outward until it has consumed the last of what it was meant to protect. Vlad has protected Wallachia from Mehmed II. He has not protected Wallachia from Vlad. And in the long accounting of history, it is not always clear which protection was more necessary, or which absence will be mourned longer, or whether the man who stops an empire and loses a country is a hero or a warning, or simply a human being who understood power completely and was destroyed by TT. Hat understanding, as such people so often are. The stakes stand in the fields outside Targovinte. The army is gone. The summer continues. In the weeks following Mehmed's withdrawal, Vlad III wins the military campaign and loses everything else. The Ottoman army crosses back over the Danube. Wallachia is not annexed. The greatest military force in Europe has been turned back by a man with 30,000 soldiers and a willingness to do things that other men cannot bring themselves to do. And then, with the speed of a structure that has been under unbearable stress for too long, everything collapses. The silence that settles over Wallachia in the days after the Ottoman withdrawal is not the silence of victory. It is something older and more ambiguous than that. The silence of a country that has survived something it cannot yet name, that stands in the wreckage of its own fields and its own burned villages, and looks at what survival has cost and cannot yet decide whether the arithmetic makes sense. The wells are poisoned, the livestock are gone, the crops that were not burned by Vlad's own retreating forces have been consumed or destroyed by the passage of 100,000 men and their animals and their engines of war. Wallachia is intact in the technical sense that it has not been absorbed into the Ottoman administrative system, and this is not nothing. It is, in fact, everything that Vlad set out to achieve. But a country that has been deliberately unmade in order to survive is still a country that has been unmade, and the people who live in it must now live in what remains. Vlad understands this. He is not a man given to illusion about what things cost. He has known since childhood, since the years in Edirne, since the news of his father's murder reached him across enemy lines, that the world does not reward survival with comfort. It rewards survival with more survival if you are fortunate, and with nothing at all if you are not. He rides through the scorched landscape of his principality in the summer of 1462, and he sees what he has made, and there is no evidence that he regrets any of it. There is also no evidence that he believes the worst is behind him. He is right not to believe it. The boyars begin their calculations in earnest now, and the calculations are not complicated. They are, in fact, the same calculations they have been performing every day of Vlad's reign, the same cold arithmetic of survival that governs every decision made by men whose first loyalty is to their own continuation. For 6 years, the answer to the central question, is survival under Vlad preferable to the available alternatives, has come out, however narrowly, in Vlad's favor. He is brutal, yes. He impales men for disloyalty, for corruption, for what he perceives as weakness, sometimes for offenses so minor that the punishment seems to belong to a different moral universe than the crime. But he is also effective. The Ottomans have not absorbed Wallachia. The tribute has been refused. The raids across the Danube have demonstrated a military capacity that no Wallachian voivode has shown in living memory. There has been, under Vlad, something that might almost be called order, a savage and terrifying order, purchased at enormous cost, but order nonetheless. And now the order is breaking, because the thing that fear-based power cannot survive is the arrival of a credible alternative. And the alternative arrives now in the person of Radu, Vlad's younger brother, riding north from Ottoman-held territory with the backing of Mehmed's court and the promise of a future that can be planned. For Radu the Handsome, they call him, a man who spent his own years in Edirne and came away from them with different lessons than his brother, who found in the Ottoman world not an enemy to be studied and eventually weaponized, but a civilization worth accommodating, a power worth aligning with. He is not a conqueror riding into Wallachia. He is a relief. He is the answer to a question the boyars have been afraid to ask out loud. The defections do not come as a conspiracy. There is no single dramatic moment of betrayal, no midnight meeting in some torchlit hall where the great families of Wallachia formally transfer their allegiance. It comes the way structural collapse always comes. One load-bearing element giving way quietly, almost imperceptibly, and then another, and then the recognition spreading through the remaining structure that the weight it is being asked to carry can no longer be distributed, and then everything at once. A boyar family that has been calculating the odds for weeks makes its decision and rides south toward Radu's advancing forces. Then another family, watching the first, makes the same calculation and arrives at the same conclusion. Then another. The arithmetic is not about loyalty or courage or even self-interest in any complicated sense. It is about the future. Vlad has never been able to offer his boyars a future they can plan for, because a ruler who governs through fear has no currency that survives the first credible challenge to his power, and the challenge has now arrived, and the currency is worthless. Vlad watches his principality dissolve around him with the focused attention of a man who has seen this before, who has lived this before, who was 11 years old the first time the ground shifted beneath him and has been watching for the next shift ever since. He contracts. He pulls his remaining forces northward, away from the advancing Radu, away from the boyars who have already made their decisions. He is not fleeing, or not only fleeing, he is calculating, still as he has always calculated, the path to the next position from which something can be rebuilt. He has done this before. He has been in exile before, has wandered through Moldavia and Transylvania with nothing but his name and his reputation and his absolute refusal to accept the permanence of his own defeat. He has reclaimed the throne before from a position that looked impossible. He will do it again. He turns north toward Matthias Corvinus, King of Hungary, his patron and his ally, the man whose military commitment to the anti-Ottoman cause Vlad has spent the better part of a year trying to force into being. The Bulgarian raid of the winter of 1461 to 1462 was designed for this moment, designed to create exactly the conditions under which Matthias would have no choice but to honor the alliance, to bring Hungarian arms into the field alongside Wallachian ones, to make of the Carpathian frontier a genuine barrier rather than a permeable membrane. The letter Vlad sent to Matthias in the aftermath of the raid, that extraordinary document, with its columns of the dead catalogued with bureaucratic precision, its implicit demand dressed as a report, its confidence that the numbers would speak for themselves, that letter was not just a record. It was a claim. It was Vlad saying, "I have done my part, now do yours." Matthias does not do his part. What Matthias does instead is arrest him. The exact mechanism of the arrest is disputed, as almost everything about Vlad's life is disputed. The documentary record filtered through the interests of those who kept it, and the gaps left by those who did not. There are letters that appear to show Vlad negotiating secretly with the Ottomans, offering accommodation, perhaps even submission. Matthias presents these letters to the Pope, to the watching courts of Europe, as justification for what he does next. Most historians who examine them carefully conclude that the letters are forged, or at the very least, substantially altered. That they are a diplomatic instrument manufactured to serve a purpose, the purpose being to transform a dangerous and expensive ally into a manageable and useful captive. The point is not that Matthias is a villain. The point is that a captive Vlad is more useful to Matthias than an indebted one. A living Vlad who has just turned back the Ottoman army is a man to whom enormous obligations are owed, a man who will call those obligations in, a man whose demands will be loud and specific and backed by a moral authority that is very difficult to refuse. A captive Vlad is a trophy, proof of Hungarian power, evidence of Matthias's control over the volatile Wallachia frontier, a diplomatic asset that can be displayed to the Pope and to Venice and to the other powers of Christendom, as evidence that Hungary is managing the Eastern question responsibly. Vlad has made himself too dangerous to remain anyone's ally for long. This is the thing that his entire career has been building toward, the payoff of every calculation, the final lesson of the buffer state. There is no permanent patron, only temporary utility, and when the utility shifts, the patron shifts with it. He is taken to Visegrad. He will remain there, in one form of custody or another, for the next 12 years. Visegrad is comfortable. There are books and visitors, and the particular dignity of a captivity that acknowledges the captive's importance even while denying his freedom. The castle sits above the Danube on the Hungarian side, a position of considerable beauty, and Vlad is housed not in a dungeon but in apartments appropriate to a man of his rank, which is to say that Matthias understands that the way you treat a captive prince tells the watching world something aboo. What you think of princes. Vlad is not tortured. He is not humiliated in any formal sense. He is simply stopped, held in place, prevented from being the thing he has always been, which is a man in motion. He converts to Catholicism during these years. It is almost certainly a political gesture, the kind of accommodation his father would have recognized. Vlad III, who spent his own career navigating between Catholic Hungary and Ottoman Islam, who delivered his sons into Ottoman captivity and accepted Ottoman backing and Hungarian backing in alternating seasons, who understood that religious identity in the 15th century is also a diplomatic instrument. The son learns the same lesson the father learned, though the father did not survive it. Vlad converts, and the conversion changes nothing essential about him, because nothing essential about him has ever been located in his religious observance. It is a transaction. He is still the same man. He remarries during these years as well. A Hungarian noblewoman, a connection to the Corvinus court, another thread of accommodation woven into the fabric of his captivity. He is not idle. He is never idle. He receives visitors, maintains correspondence, follows the news from Wallachia and from the Ottoman frontier with the attention of a man who is still entirely operational, still processing information, still building the map of the world that he will eventually need when the opportunity arrives. Because he believes the opportunity will arrive. This is perhaps the most remarkable thing about him, not the violence, which is comprehensible within the context of his age and his circumstances, but the patience, the absolute, unnerving patience of a man who has been waiting his entire life for the next opening and who has never once confused waiting with surrender. He files the experience away, the arrest, the forged letters, the 12 years at Visegrad. He files it all away the same way he filed away his father's murder and his own years in Edirne and the first loss of the throne in 1448 and every subsequent reversal as information about the world that will eventually be useful. He is 40 years old, or thereabouts, in the middle years of his captivity, and he has already lived 3 or 4 lives that would break most men. And he is still entirely himself, still the boy who watched the Ottomans from a position of captivity and learned everything he could about them because knowledge was the only weapon available, still the man who rode into the Ottoman camp in the dark with the specific intention of killing the most powerful man in the world, still waiting. Wallachia, meanwhile, continues. Radu rules under Ottoman patronage, and the boyars who defected to him lived the lives they calculated were available to them. Quieter lives, less dramatic lives, lives organized around the possibility of a future that can be planned for. Whether they are right to have chosen this is a question history does not resolve. The country survives. It also accommodates, pays tribute, functions as the revenue stream the Ottomans always intended it to be. The independence that Vlad purchased with poisoned wells and forests of stakes and a night attack that nearly killed the Sultan. That independence does not outlast him in any meaningful way. It was always, perhaps, the kind of independence that can only exist in the moment of its assertion, that cannot be institutionalized or inherited or passed on to the next generation, because it was built entirely on one man's extraordinary and unrepeatable combination of knowledge and ruthlessness. And will. Mehmed II never speaks of the Wallachian summer easily. He goes on to campaign across Greece and Serbia and Anatolia, and will die in 1481 still in the field, still expanding, still the conqueror, and history will judge him as one of the most consequential rulers of the millennium. But the summer of 1462 costs him something that does not show up in the ledgers of territory, gained or lost, something in the rarer currency of certainty, the unshakable confidence of a man who has never before encountered a situation he could not resolve by the application of sufficient force. He expected to add Wallachia to his empire in a matter of weeks. He found instead a man who understood him completely and used that understanding as a weapon. And the encounter leaves a mark that is invisible in the historical record and unmistakable in the space around it, in the things Mehmed does not say and the campaigns he does not launch in the years immediately following. Vlad returns to power in 1476. Of course he does. The opportunity arrives, as he always believed it would, in the form of a shift in the regional balance, Ottoman pressure, Hungarian interest, the eternal instability of the Wallachian throne. And he takes it with the same decisive confidence he has always brought to such moments. His third reign is brief and violent, and entirely consistent with everything that has come before it. He is still himself. He has always been only himself, which is both the source of his extraordinary effectiveness and the reason he cannot be sustained, cannot be institutionalized, cannot be made into something that outlasts the specific and unrepeatable fact of his presence. He dies later that same year, in 1476, in circumstances that are ambiguous and contested and likely to remain so. He may be killed in battle against the Ottomans. He may be assassinated by his own boyars, the class he terrorized and could never finally subdue, the class whose cold arithmetic of survival was always going to outlast his capacity to frighten them into submission. He may be killed by men in his own retinue. The sources disagree, as the sources have always disagreed about Vlad, each account shaped by the interests of the person keeping it, each version of his death serving some purpose that has nothing to do with accuracy. His head, by some accounts, is sent to Constantinople, to Mehmed, preserved in honey. A final transaction between two men who understood each other completely and spent their lives trying to destroy what the other represented. The central tragedy holds, across all the versions, across all the centuries of myth and distortion and reinvention. He defeats the greatest military force of his age through psychological genius and is destroyed not by that force, but by the people he was trying to save. A ruler who governs through fear has no constituency when the fear finally breaks. This is not a new lesson. It is perhaps the oldest lesson in a literature of power, repeated in every civilization that has ever tried to build something durable on the foundation of terror. And it is never learned in advance, only recognized afterward in the wreckage. Visegrad is comfortable. The Danube moves below the castle windows in all seasons, and the books are there, and the visitors come and go, and the man who once rode into the dark toward the center of the world's most powerful army sits in his apartments and waits and files the information away and remains, in every particular, that matters, exactly who he has always been. The patience is the most frightening thing about him. It suggests that he has not been defeated. It suggests that he is simply between positions, as he has always been between positions, calculating the next move in a game that does not end until he does. His story does not conclude so much as it simply stops, the way such lives always stop. Mid-calculation, mid-waiting, in the middle of something unfinished, the next move already forming in the mind of a man who never once confused the end of one thing with the end of everything.